Well, hello, everybody. Welcome today to Security, Cost Efficiency, and Simplicity, Migrating Databases to Cloud SQL. By a show of hands, to start us off, how many folks here have heard of Cloud SQL? OK, great. Keep your hands up if you're already using it. Still a big portion. That's awesome. Well, so for those of you who have experience, the good news is that we're going to talk about a lot of new things today. For those of you who are less familiar, we will still be going over some of the basics, though, which is going to be a great content. And I think it's safe to say that you're in the right place to kind of explore how our managed databases deliver on this session's title: achieving stronger security, maximizing the value of your investments, and streamlining your operations. Today, I'll be presenting with my colleague, Yoav.
Hi, I'm Yoav. I am from product marketing for databases at Google Cloud.
And I'm Luedke, an SMB product marketing manager. I've been working with small and medium-sized businesses since starting at Google, first in Google Ads and for the last few years in Google Cloud. So I'm super excited for the chance to talk to you all today. So why are we focusing on security, cost efficiency, and simplicity? Well, we know that these are some of the biggest challenges you're facing today. A recent survey asked leaders at 250 small and medium-sized businesses to rate the importance of a variety of business challenges that they're facing. 80% of those leaders rated managing costs as a very important business challenge. 82% said the same about keeping their data and applications secure, and 74% agreed about maximizing the productivity of their employees, a problem that can really be exacerbated by outdated technology and complicated operations. Now, these aren't probably very surprising to you, but they do paint a clear picture about how important digital transformation is to staying competitive and being able to ultimately overcome these challenges. And GenAI adds a brand new dimension to this idea of digital transformation. GenAI has changed the game in a lot of ways, but those three challenges for SMBs remain really consistent. And I'm sure you're familiar with some of the ways GenAI can improve your operations, not least because of the wonderful presentations we've heard so far this conference, from task automation to even code generation. And we also know that there might be some apprehension to adopting GenAI solutions. In recent interviews we actually conducted with SMBs, three common themes became apparent. First, we heard a lot about concerns with data security, especially within the privacy and legal constraints of each industry. Second, we heard about the uncertainty with cost, with most people assuming a hefty price tag for actually adopting GenAI solutions. And last, we did hear about concerns with how complicated it may be to actually adopt these solutions and the need for the right resources and industry-specific use cases to get you there. So to solve for these challenges, you're not going to make these huge hardware investments and build on-prem, right? We're looking to the cloud. In this session, we're specifically thinking about databases and how you run your databases in the cloud. It's essential that your databases can deliver on continuous availability and high reliability. Your customers expect your apps to work around the clock, and that puts a lot of pressure on your database experts to keep the engines of those apps, the databases, running all the time. And behind the need for continuous availability, you need databases that have security you can trust. Data breaches are increasing year over year, as is the cost to remediate those data breaches. So you need databases that can provide real-time threat detection, automated and on-demand backups, as well as auditing, authentication, and encryption. Next, you're looking for databases that can provide a strong level of integration. So if you're using world-class databases with tons of data, you want to be able to generate insights that can really power your business. You want databases that can act like a unified data platform with ML and AI capabilities built in. Lastly, you want databases that go beyond fully managed. Gone are the days of having an army of admins or even devs working around the clock to keep the lights on, doing configuring, patching, scaling themselves. The next generation of databases go beyond. They're helping devs drive business value and become more intelligent about their applications, databases, and how they're able to manage the data. So that's where Google Cloud comes in. Our managed database service portfolio is designed to provide coverage while minimizing complexity. We're in a unique position at Google because of our decades of firsthand experience developing one-of-a-kind database systems that provide massive scalability, reliability, and security for your applications from the same underlying architecture that powers most of our most popular products like YouTube, search, and maps. 10 to 20 years ago, the entire market was relational, but new types of databases, mostly the NoSQL ones you see here on the right, have gained a lot of popularity. But in the last 5 to 10 years, relational databases have been making a pretty serious comeback, and a huge percentage of those use Cloud SQL. That's why today we're focusing on Cloud SQL, our fully managed relational database service. From our earlier discussion, I know a lot of you are using Cloud SQL already, but I'll do a quick overview for those who are less familiar. Cloud SQL is a fully managed database service with full compatibility for MySQL, PostgreSQL, and SQL Server. It simplifies database management and makes it easy to set up, operate, and scale your relational database. It provides enterprise-grade data protection, security, and governance, and is trusted by thousands of organizations globally. In fact, over 95% of Google Cloud's top 100 customers use Cloud SQL, and over 1 million GKE pods connect to Cloud SQL. It's built with devs in mind, being API first and providing application-centric observability to your team to more effectively monitor, troubleshoot, and fix issues with your applications.
Okay. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for that introduction. And it's a little hard to read the text. Thanks for that. And with that introduction, what we want to do is to go over the main use cases or scenarios that you might find yourself when you adopt databases in the cloud. And let's drill down a little bit into every one of these four use cases. So the first one is when you do database migrations, and you do what everybody calls lift and shift, where you just take basically the database, the rest of the application stack, and you just move it to the cloud pretty much as is. So we'll talk a little bit about that. The second case is when you do what we call database modernization. So you essentially move the application to the cloud, but you take that as an opportunity to make some changes, maybe to replace the database with a newer one, maybe to change some code, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The third one is when you're not migrating your application from anywhere, you're just actually building it in the cloud, and that's an opportunity to add Gen AI and a lot of other things, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And the last one is when you didn't even write the application yourself, you're just adopting an application from another, let's say a software vendor, and the application runs on one of these databases, Postgres, SQL Server, MySQL, and you need a solution for running that database in the cloud. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So I think kind of by definition, these are really the four scenarios. Is there anything that is not on the list? Let me know if there's something that's not included here. I think these are pretty much, this is pretty much an exhaustive list. And we'll try to focus more on what's new since many of you already know Cloud SQL, and that's what we expected. So we'll talk a little bit more about what's new in the last year or so, or let's say since the last Cloud Next event. Okay, so let's start with database migrations. We talked about security, cost efficiency, and ease of use. So let's go very quickly over these things. So for security, obviously the first thing that you would need is encryption. Across the board, encryption of the data between the application and the database, encryption of the data that we store on disk, and the option to also use your own encryption keys if you want a higher level of security or if you're in a regulated industry that requires that. So all these options are available. Second thing is authentication and authorization. So basically being able to control who has access to your data. And for that, we generally recommend our IAM cloud service for managing. And you can also use the built-in security that exists in each one of these database engines. And then finally, logging and auditing. You can send all the logs to the centralized log service on Google Cloud. and manage and get alerts for things that go wrong. So all of these things are much easier to do with a managed database than if you were to just install one of these databases yourself and set all of that up and set up the encryption and the logging and all these things. It's much easier if you just take advantage of what we offer here. Next point we wanted to bring up is around cost efficiency. So we actually did a survey with IDC last year to see how much people are benefiting from moving from an identical database engine from a database engine to the same engine in Google Cloud. So for example, people who were managing MySQL on their own, whether in the cloud or not, and then they moved to Cloud SQL and let the product just do all the administration, backups, and upgrades and all of that. And by the way, most of the customers in the survey were smaller and medium businesses. I think maybe all of them except maybe one or two. So this should be pretty representative of the results that you can expect to get. So got some really nice numbers. Some of them are here. For example, 246% ROI in 3 years. Meaning, if you spend $1 on Cloud SQL, then you can expect to get $2.46 back within 3 years. So that plus the time to until the break even was 11 months. And there were a bunch of other data points in the survey which you can just download from the link that you see here. So how many databases can be managed by a single database administrator, for example, which is obviously much higher if everything is automated. So in the past, one administrator, I think, managed maybe 10 databases or something like that, and now it's up to dozens or hundreds of databases per person. So things you can take into account in terms of cost efficiency. The other thing we wanted to mention, and this is actually the first time I'm mentioning something which is new, so we have these little icons at the top. There is a new edition, in case you missed it, of Cloud SQL that came out. We announced it about 2 months ago, I think, called Enterprise Plus. And that is essentially for your higher end applications or the ones that need a higher level of reliability and performance. So the existing Cloud SQL that you've been using for all these years is now called the Enterprise Edition. And that just remains as is with no changes, no change in pricing, et cetera. Definitely that's still a good fit for a lot of applications. If it gives you what you need, you can save the money and use the Enterprise Edition. If you want a higher level of reliability, like 4 nines, plus performance improvements in read and write in certain cases, and longer retention of data, which you might need for security or auditing purposes, then take a look at the Enterprise Plus Edition. So again, this is an optional upgrade for those of you who need it. And then finally, we talked a little bit about ease of use already, but I just wanted to also highlight the ease of migration. So our database migration service, which is a product that you can use separately from Cloud SQL, will basically, like we called it, lift and shift your databases from wherever they are, can be in the cloud, can be on premises, anywhere else, into Cloud SQL. So it will move all your data over, and then you can cut over when the data is ready and when the 2 instances are synced. So if you're doing a cloud migration, take a look at that. It's free for migrations to Cloud SQL. So one of the nicest things is that it's completely serverless, so it manages all of the migration resources on its own. Right, so if you need CPU power, there's some program that's running there and it's copying the data over. All of that is completely serverless. You don't need to manage any resources, and it doesn't cost anything to use it. So take a look at that. And then finally, on the topic of, I would say, all of these things, security and ease of use and cost efficiency, I want to recommend, no pun intended, a feature called Cloud SQL Recommenders, which is built into the product and provides various recommendations around performance, security, cost, and availability. So, for example, it'll tell you whether you have idle resources that are not in use. You have a database that hasn't been accessed for a long time, so it alerts you to that. You can shut it down if nobody's using it. It alerts you to performance problems and security problems like, really broad IP access Like you've opened up your database to any IP address on the internet, probably not what you meant. So all kinds of security things like that you might have missed, you can get through these recommenders. Some of them are in preview, some of them are released, so definitely recommend it. And that's something that, again, this is something that with a managed database, it's much easier to have things like that than when you manage databases on your own. And then finally, I wanted to highlight one of our customers called Songkick, who has been a Cloud SQL customer for a long time. They've actually migrated their databases over. And you can read all the details later, but basically we're going to bring some examples of customers that have, and that are roughly the size of the companies that we have here in the audience. Okay, so with that, we want to move on to the next topic, which is modernization, where you are essentially moving your database over, but also making some changes along the way. So Sarah, over to you.
Thank you, Yoav. Yeah, so the goal here is to transition off your legacy proprietary databases and modernize your applications with open source. So when you're embarking on a heterogeneous database migration, migration, of course, is just half the story, because you'll have to actually convert the database. Our database migration service that Yoav mentioned supports those heterogeneous Oracle to PostgreSQL migrations, meaning you can migrate your Oracle workloads from anywhere to Cloud SQL for PostgreSQL. This is a new capability moving from preview to general availability and assists in modernizing your migrated workloads. This conversion enables you to reduce your dependence on legacy databases and lower costs overall. You'll also be able to tap into serverless and secure data movement and monitoring. And although this is great, there's still a good portion of manual intervention. It's really exciting that we're in preview, actually, though, with new in-product capabilities of built-in code and schema conversion. So to double-click on that last point, if you look carefully here, you'll see a bunch of objects, like tables and functions here on the left, in an Oracle database that need to be converted. This, of course, is typically quite the challenge because the two databases are different. But we recently announced this new capability, currently in preview, that converts them for you. This is a big step in our modernization capabilities. Most products of this kind have a less than ideal UI and require a lot of extra manual steps. So the idea behind this innovation is to provide a simple, easy experience to enable your team to modernize faster and more effectively. So if you're able to convert most of your data, what about the rest? Well, even fresher, we just announced a brand new Gen AI capability that can handle that for you. Here, we're using Duet AI to look at your Oracle functions and convert them into PostgreSQL. The user experience is exactly the same as the previous feature, but this is getting us even closer to that full conversion with Gen AI. This is a really cutting-edge development that can help you further reduce time spent on migration and conversion, so we're really excited to offer this new capability. Back to you, Yoav.
Okay, thank you very much. Let us go into the next topic, which is building new applications on top of Cloud SQL. So, the whole topic of how you build applications in the cloud and how you use a database. I mean, it's a huge topic, which is obviously much more than we can cover here. So what we were thinking is let's talk specifically about some of the main themes that have been at this event. And we want to talk about how you make your application data-driven, which is, you can look at that in two ways. One is, how do you use the data that the application collects in the database in order to to give the user interesting feedback and things they need to know as part of using the application. And the other side of it is for you as the company running the application, how you can analyze that data and get business insights into that. So we thought we would focus on those things specifically. So let's start with analytics. So basically, in the analytics use case, you would typically have a database such as MySQL, Postgres, SQL Server that is transactional, that the application is based on, and it's saving all of the data in the database. And separately from that, you might have a data warehouse such as BigQuery in the case of Google Cloud, and you would want to kind of use data from both of them in order to get better business insights and provide better information to the user. So the classic example, I think, like everywhere I look, is always everyone uses the same example, is that on the transactional side, you have sales orders. So there's some application that's putting all the sales orders into the database. So that would be, in this case, on the Cloud SQL side. And then you have customer data, which you've analyzed, and who are my best customers, and what has every customer done, and who's most likely to buy what, and things like that. And that's analytics. That would be in BigQuery in this example. So the question is, like, how can you combine both of those data sources to ask questions that go across both? So which of my best customers has done so-and-so, bought a specific product? So that question goes across both of these data stores, right? So I want to recommend 2 ways to do that. And some of them have been recently updated, so you can take a look if you're building anything like that. The first option is to use what's called federated queries, where basically you can run a query in BigQuery that will also look at data in Cloud SQL. So you can query across both data sources and get a result in BigQuery, and then continue and do your work, whatever you're analyzing in BigQuery. So that's one way to do it. You can find all of that in the documentation of both products. The second option is to stream the data. So it's a little bit like video streaming. So streaming in the sense that all the changes that get made in Cloud SQL, all of those transactions get streamed almost right away or almost in real time into BigQuery. And now all the data is in BigQuery, and you can just continue with a analytical query in BigQuery. So then you can run any query that you want. So essentially, like if you don't know ahead of time what queries you're going to want, then maybe it's good to stream all of the data so that you have it all in one place. And now you can do queries that go across both of these types of data. So things to think about in your next project. Second thing we wanted to talk about was Gen AI. So if any of you think that you've come here and you haven't heard enough about Gen AI in this conference, then I can fix it now. I'm just kidding. So a few things that are important to know about building Gen AI applications. So if you write a chatbot and your first chatbot might look something like this. So by the time the chatbot gets to the second question, it doesn't even remember what you asked in the first, what you talked about in the first question, right? So the capital of which country? Because the models that you use for Gen AI essentially don't have any memory. So you call them, they give a result, and they go on to the next call that somebody else might call them. And a model like the ones behind Bard or ChatGPT or all those applications, they don't remember all of the queries of all the people who called them. Try to think how much memory, how much storage they would need in order to do that. So you as an application writer, you're writing a chatbot, you need to handle all those things, and you need to store all that data. So a database like the ones we're talking about here are perfect for that. So that helps you to provide both. So we would say 3 things. One is to provide relevant data. So in this example, the capital of France doesn't change very often. But if the question was, how many units of whatever do you have in inventory, then you want to look it up in the database, right? So you need to provide accurate information to give an accurate response. The second thing is to have the context, right? So the chatbot needs to remember what you were just talking about. And you also want it to be easy to use, and especially like if you're a small business, you need, or medium business, you need easy to use tools that will help you to do that. So you might have heard a lot at this event that everything in the Gen AI world is essentially. Did I click too much?
Thank you.
No. Did I accidentally click? No. Okay. We're good. So basically, you might have heard that in the Gen AI world, everything is stored as vectors. So all of the questions, all of the answers, all of the inputs into Gen AI models are stored as vectors, which you might remember like from algebra in high school. So what's been added to databases in the last few months and years is the ability to store vectors, to pass these vectors along. In Cloud SQL for Postgres, we announced that a few months ago that it supports pgvector, which is a very popular package in Postgres databases for managing vectors. So you can search for them, you can look up information, you can add information to the response. That's basically how you do the layer under the chatbot in order to store information, look it up, and give it back to the model. And wow, the text is there a way to make the text, to make the slide on the left bigger, maybe? Because it's a little hard to see which slide we're on. Sorry about that. Okay. So we want to mention one other aspect of Gen AI, which is also being added to our database products, which is using Duet AI as the assistant to help you to do your development work. So in Cloud SQL, we announced, this was just a few days ago, that you will be able to use natural language as you're developing an application in Cloud SQL to do some of the work to help you with your queries and with developing your data model as a database developer. So you can go and say, if you have you're building a game and you have a list of winners in the game, and you can say, give me the list of the top 10 winners of the game, and that'll generate a SQL query, and you can put that into your application if you don't remember the SQL syntax and things like that. And similarly, it can also update the data model. So, add a middle name column to this table, and it'll just go and it'll do the operation that will go and update that table. So all of these things are coming to Duet AI. We showed them for some products at this event, and we're rolling them out to other databases, including Cloud SQL. And then finally, Homatics, another example of I would say, medium-sized customer that has migrated that has built an application in Cloud SQL. This is not an example of a company that uses Gen AI. We wouldn't say that because it's very new, but they've been a happy and successful Cloud SQL customer for a while. Okay, and with that, we get to our last category. Sarah, back to you.
Thank you, Yoav. Yes, we're at our fourth and final use case. So this is third-party applications. We know everybody wants to reduce the time and resources spent on those tedious database administration tasks. So if you're running your third-party database on SQL Server, for example, you need to not only deploy the application, but also deploy the database with confidence. And especially as a small to mid-sized business, you'll be more likely to use maybe this third-party application versus necessarily building your own from scratch. And we want to ensure our customers have the best experience when deploying and using their partner solution of choice, along with our database services like Cloud SQL. That's why it's super exciting for us to announce Google Cloud Ready Cloud SQL. This Google Cloud Ready designation recognizes partner products that work well with Cloud SQL and have met a core set of functional and interoperability requirements. You'll notice there is a lot of database tool vendors on this slide. If you're currently using these tools to manage your databases, the good news is these tools will continue to work the way you know them to. And the idea behind this initiative is to help our customers reduce costs associated with product evaluation and focus more time on modernizing your database solutions and applications that will drive faster data to value for your business. And that brings us to the end of our presentation today. Thank you all again.